Welcome to The Truth Within. My name is Sai, and this is the weekly reflection for Friday, the 7th of May. Now, if you cast your mind back to a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about a story that I pointed out in the Bible around a rich man approaching Jesus, asking how he could guarantee his place in heaven. So he's asking or posing a spiritual question there. And the answer that comes from Jesus is a physical one. Give your money away to the poor. So it's a physical action that's taking place there. And every day this is what we're doing, because we're taking physical action in some way, shape or form. And I think for a lot of our actions, we don't really understand the magnitude of those actions. So for people who care about spirituality, there's that deep interconnectedness that I always talk about around these physical issues. There is this battle between light and dark within ourselves every single day, with the choices that we make and the way we act around others, the way we speak to other people. And what you want to cultivate as a spiritual being is you want to cultivate the good that's within you, the merit and the virtue, because that's what really matters while you're here. Doing goodness in the world and helping others to find their light and their way out of this matrix that we call reality. We all have intuition, every single one of us. That feeling that something's not quite right or something's a little bit off. And I think what we need to start tuning into is into trusting that intuition just a little bit more than we do. And again, this is implicit for your spiritual growth and for your spiritual well-being, because as we participate here using the mechanism of free will, we get to co-create and participate in this reality and choose the roles in which we want to play. And there's consequences to those roles. If you want to step into the role of good and do good for humanity and heal people and help people, you'll be rewarded for those acts, but only if they're done in a selfless manner. As Alan Watts rightly points out, virtue that recognizes itself as virtue is actually not virtue at all. And for those putting negativity out into the world, there'll also be consequences for that too. And it's easy for me to speak about it from the perspective that I have going through these different experiences. But this is where it's important now to turn to those spiritual texts, those spiritual teachers, those spiritual beings that have gone through their own experiences to try and amass and gain some understanding about what we're facing here. We have to stop living in fear because, yes, the danger is real, but fear is a choice. And this is something that I well understand from the spiritual healings that I've participated in, because some of the situations that I've found myself in have been absolutely terrifying. But one of the important things I learned very quickly as a healer was that fear, that negative energy, feeds those negative entities. So really, fear is going to disable us. It's not going to enable us to make good choices. When we're in a fear state, we begin to operate from the amygdala, which puts us into fight or flight, where we have to make very quick decisions based on survival. And governments and people in positions of power, and in fact the mainstream media, know exactly how powerful a device this is to put people into a fear state, to keep them fearful, because that helps drive certain narratives, it helps drive certain agendas. And in fact, when it comes to consumerism, fear helps companies sell products. It's something that I was taught when I was learning about media, how advertisers and designers will incorporate these ideas of fear to help drive sales. So it's really prevalent and it's helped steering us as a mass population in a certain direction. And we need to be able to step back to a place of logic, take out the emotion, take out the fear, be logical about the decisions that we make, and to think twice about the people that we're trusting, to have that discernment. Like, I can't stress that enough in this time, discernment, because finding your way back to God is going to be a very difficult task. And this is alluded to in many spiritual texts. Again, in Buddhism and in Taoism, they talk about a narrow gate, that very few people will find their way back through the narrow gate. This is also spoken about in the Bible with that same idea of the narrow gate, that not many people will find their way back to God. And that's on us. That's our responsibility as individuals to take the time to explore the ideas around God, around spirituality, whether you subscribe to a religion or whether you just consider yourself spiritual. Really understanding at its fundamental core, what does that mean? What does that mean for me as an individual? And how should that manifest in my life? This idea of not being able to be with friends or with loved ones or with the people that we care about, that we're not allowed to hug one another, and to the fact that your religious institutions are closed, the doors are closed. This is not how the light or God or good would operate. It would never close its doors no matter the circumstance. These are techniques employed by darkness, employed by evil, lies, manipulation, coercion, because the one thing that evil will do is present itself as good. It's a narrative found in all spiritual texts that evil will come and it will present itself as good. And without having that discernment, a lot of people will fall for that manipulation and they'll follow those lies. And this is a huge problem that we're stacked with today. As quoted from the Bible, Isaiah 5:20. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. So thinking about those words and applying that to the world that we find ourselves in today, are you perceiving what's going on as good as evil or as evil as good? And this is what you really need to get right. This is what your spiritual growth depends on, being able to have that discernment. And we can use discernment to think about characters who we've come to know through history or through religious teachings, people like Jesus, Buddha, Guru Nanak, and think about how they would react in this time. Their doors would be open because to them God knows no bounds. There is no boundaries, there is no closing the doors to God. In Taoism and in Buddhism, there's this idea of you having what they refer to as a Buddha nature, your kind of true self. And that true self is described as being childlike. It's described as being innocent. And that purity is what you find at the core of our soul. And inherently, we recognize it within one another. And we start to form this picture which we believe to be a kind of truth. And that people aren't capable of this great evil. But unfortunately, that evil does exist. And it's an evil that's prevalent in very powerful positions in the world. And I'll finish off with something which is really sobering. And it's very difficult to comprehend, but really speaks to everything that I've been talking about in this reflection. And that is a few quotes by a guy called Michael Yeadon. And Michael Yeadon was the former vice president of Pfizer and has been speaking out repeatedly against this medical intervention that we've all been asked to partake in. But the article's entitled, "Your government is lying to you in a way that could lead to your death." And let me just read the subtitle here. Dr. Michael Yeadon, Pfizer's former vice president and chief scientist for allergy and respiratory, who spent 32 years in the industry leading new medicines research and retired from the pharmaceutical giant with the most senior research position in his field. So this is a really prominent guy speaking on real expertise and real knowledge, but just know that his messaging is echoed by many professionals and many experts all around the world. Michael Yeadon goes on to say, "It's become absolutely clear to me, even when I talk to intelligent people, friends, acquaintances, they can tell that what I'm telling them is something important. But when I get to that point where I say, your government is lying to you in a way that could lead to your death and to that of your children, they can't begin to engage with it. And I think maybe 10% of them understand what I said, and 90% of them blank their understanding of it because it's too difficult. And my concern is that we are going to lose this, because people will not deal with the possibility that anyone is so evil. Towards a solution, we need God." And Michael Yeadon says, "I'm a scientist, and I can tell you, talking to non-scientists, using science as a tool will not work, it will fail. So we need philosophers, people who understand logic, religion, something like that. They've got to wrestle with this, and they need to start talking in a language that people will understand. Even though I'm well-intentioned, I'm like a gabbling alien as far as most people are concerned. They won't believe their government will lie to them. They don't believe the government would ever do anything that would harm them in that way, but they do, and they are doing such things." And he goes on to talk about moments in history to remind us that that evil actually does exist in the world. And if you look back through history, people who did these seemingly evil deeds or evil acts actually felt they were coming from a place of good. They actually believed on some level in what they were doing. As noted by a tweet that I saw this week, which is an account that posts quotes for a famous Soviet dissident, and his name was Alexander Stolchenitsyn. And the quote said this: "To do evil A human being must first of all believe that what he is doing is good. So I think this is the first step in understanding how people take the course of actions that they take in the world. And this is where we find people start stepping into that role of playing God, making these decisions around life or death, taking away autonomy from individuals and forcing them or coercing them to live a certain lifestyle or to be a certain way or to make certain choices. But we need to find and bring that light. We need to find that positivity. We need to find it somehow, some way, because that's what's going to get us through this. This is how we're going to be able to push back against the dark. And I'll leave you with this, which was a post that I put up to a group on Facebook. And somebody in that group had put up a post to say that they were struggling with the day-to-day, with everything that's kind of going on. And so this is what I replied. It's an impossibility to know what comes next, but it's not the destination that's important. God will take us in the direction that God wants us to go. What's important is what you stand for during this time, your actions, your merits, and your virtues. Many teachings allude to this idea of attachment, and as stated in the Bible, be in the world but not of it. This life is not only about joy or about suffering, but it's also about learning and growing spiritually. Remind yourself that this is just a brief moment in your existence, an illusion in which you are participating. There may be some tough choices to make and some old ideas and attachments to let go of, but always be in the mindset of what's most important, and that's what you cultivate here during your time. Your integrity and your humanity. Don't let fear consume you, and be present in the now, because the future is an unknown, and find new ways of bringing joy into your life. This group is a testament as to what can happen when like-minded spirits can get together. And remember that you're here to be part of a great paradigm shift. It's scary, sure, but God didn't lose control here. Perhaps this is just our time to stand up and be counted. So I'll leave it here for this week. I know this was a little bit of a difficult topic to delve into, but I want people to go away from this reflection with the notion that knowledge is power. Empower yourself. Feel empowered that you can make better choices armed with good knowledge. Surround yourself with good people and use sources of information that you trust implicitly. Test those sources, test those individuals, test those people. But until next week, I shall speak to you soon. Take care and have a great weekend.